Want to give a shout out to my camera woman, Katerina Tellup, once again supporting me through all these things. Since Easter is coming up this weekend, for some people, we're going to read Rechenka's Eggs by Patricia Polacco. Some of you may remember us reading this around Easter time in other years. So this was written and illustrated by Patricia Polacco. It says, Babushka lived alone in a dacha, a little house in the country, but she was known far and wide for the fine eggs that she lovingly painted. Her eggs were so beautiful that she always won first prize at the Easter festival in Moskva. Each day, Babushka would take the shell of an egg from her basket and paint it with wonderful designs, using the shapes of stars and flowers, triangles and circles. Through the long, cold winter, Babushka painted. Now, these are a certain kind of egg called pisanki, and they are part of the Russian Easter tradition. I am not Russian, but Mr. Tellup is Russian, and his family has taught me about how to make these eggs, and I'll show you our eggs in a little bit. They're very beautiful. Then one day, after a snowstorm, Babushka went outside. She could still hear the faint sound of falling snow. It was a sound like soft rain. Herds of caribou, not hundreds, herds came to feed at Babushka's because the dry grasses they usually ate were covered with snow. A miracle, she whispered as she fed some. These wild things have found their way to me. Just then, a flock of noisy geese honked loudly overhead. As they glided over the snow, one of them faltered and fell from the sky. Babushka went to where the goose lay crumpled in the snow. A hunter did this, Babushka grumbled. She carefully picked up the goose and took it back to her little house. There, she fed the little goose from her own table, and she put the goose in her best basket, lined with the warmest quilt from her own bed. I shall name you a good name, one we can both like, eh, my little friend? She said as she patted the goose's head. How do you like Rechenka? Yes? Da? Then Rechenka it shall be. With Babushka's care, Rechenka grew stronger as each day passed. To repay her kindness, Rechenka laid an egg for breakfast every morning. As Rechenka got better, she waddled about the little house, exploring every nook and cupboard. Now you might hear something in the background. It's not a goose, it's our cat. One day, she jumped on top of Babushka's work table, overturning the jars of brightly colored paint that she used to color the eggs. Yet, Babushka screamed as she chased the goose with the broom. No! The frightened goose flapped her wings to get away and knocked over the basket of eggs that Babushka had so lovingly painted. The eggs crashed to the floor and they shattered into millions of pieces. They were both very sad. There was no reason now for Babushka to go to the festival. The next morning, Babushka slowly got out of bed and trundled over to Rechenka's basket to get her morning egg. But when she reached into the middle of the quilt, she picked out the most brilliantly colored egg that she'd ever seen. Instead of it being plain, it was already painted. A miracle, Babushka whispered. A miracle. So she made small holes at both ends of the egg, and she blew the yolk and the white into a dish to cook and eat later for breakfast. And then she held the egg up to the morning light, and she marveled at its beauty. And after that, every morning for 12 mornings, there was another egg, each more beautiful than the one before. Soon Babushka had enough eggs to take to the festival in Moskva. How wonderful, she thought. A miracle has replaced her eggs that were broken. Spring is here, my little friend, Babushka said to Rechenka on the morning of the festival. Soon now you'll be flying off to the north with your flock. She bustled to the hearth fire and she brewed some of her most favored tea. The two shared a saucer of tea with kulich, a sweet Easter bread. She covered each piece with paska, a spread of cheese, butter, and raisins. They savored each bite together. One for you and one for me, Babushka chanted. Da? Da, my little friend, I shall sorely miss you, but you are a wild thing, and a miracle sent you to me. It would not be right to ask you to stay here with me forever. When Babushka left her little house, she took one last look at Rechenka sitting on the doorstep. She waved and took determined steps for Moskva with the basket of her precious eggs. She crossed the Lebetov Valley where the caribou mothers were walking with their newborn calves. A miracle, she thought. New little lives, always a miracle. She crossed the bridge over the Moskva River and she could see the onion domes of old Moskva. The festival was bright and exciting. There were goat carts selling kulich, processions, dancers, jugglers, laughing children playing and running. Babushka showed her old friends the eggs. Her eggs were the most beautiful in all of Russia, they thought. Look at them, the elders said. They almost glow, as if the paint is just part of the shell itself. The judges picked Babushka's eggs as the most beautiful, and she was so happy. She beamed as she looked at the first prize. A feather bed quilt. Huh! As Babushka made her way homeward, a honking flock of geese flew overhead. Babushka gave them a long, lingering look. She wondered if Rechenka had joined them. When Babushka arrived home that evening, Rechenka was gone. Alone, she put the new quilt on her little bed. She brewed a cup of tea, and she ate the last of the kulich and the paska. She got into bed with her favorite book of poems, and she drifted off to sleep. She hadn't noticed Rechenka's basket. But that night, Babushka was awakened from a sound sleep by a noise that was ever so small. It was coming from Rechenka's basket. She hobbled closer, and she saw a glorious egg. But this one was different than the others. This one quivered and moved. It made tiny muffled sounds. The egg jumped and bumped and rolled and pitched in the basket. And there was a crack, and Babushka could see the very special gift that Rechenka had left her. All a miracle, Babushka said. And this little goose remained with Babushka always. That is the story of Rechenka's eggs. And now my camera woman will show you some of the eggs that we've made over the years in our house. Ignore the 3D printer and the messy typing. These are some of the eggs that we've made, and you can see some of them have really bright colors and small details. Maybe we'll show you a video showing you how we make them. Some of them are quite elaborate and have lots and lots of pictures on them. They're not easy to make, and we don't always make them perfectly. And they're made with raw eggs, so they're very fragile. We'll talk about how we make them next time. See you next week, friends.